This is Deepin 15.8, the latest point release of this Debian-based Linux distribution. As with the other recent point releases, there are incremental changes, some of which are worth noting, and I'm going to go into some of those as well as a brief overview of the entire desktop. The first thing you notice is that the panel at the bottom now has the system tray laid out with sound, battery indicator, network indicator, wireless connection. It differentiates between wired and wireless. And this is the indicator for simple screen recorder, which I have running. Then you have the shutdown button and the time. Previously, a lot of these functions were incorporated into one button, and it was rather hard to differentiate them. This, of course, was in fashion mode. When you switched to efficient mode, the system tray was always laid out separately. If you right-click on a blank area here, under plugins, you can remove some of them. Date and time, that's gone. Shutdown, that's gone. You can also click on this left arrow here and collapse the whole thing. And what you have left is a right arrow, which you can click on if you want to get them back. Now I'm going to restore all of these plugins. Shut down. Date and time. And I usually use the efficient mode anyway. I'm going to go back to mode and select efficient mode. Now the thing that's different in efficient mode is that there's a little space over here on the right, and that is a show desktop icon. I'll open the Deepin terminal, and I'll open Deepin editor. And now when I click on the Show Desktop icon, they disappear, reappear, etc. When you go to the Control Center, that's changed also. You can see that you now have larger buttons for accounts, display, default applications, personalization, network, Bluetooth, sound, time and date, power management, mouse, keyboard and language, update, and system information. But when you click on any of these, for instance, I'm going to click on system information, you get this menu over here on the left that allows you to go quickly from one to the other without a lot of scrolling. I also want to point out that edge scrolling, at least with my touchpad, was enabled by default both during operations and during installation, which makes it easier to scroll up and down. First thing I'm going to do is to go to personalization. And here you find transparency. Now, the thing that's new there is that you used to have a window mode which was transparent, and if you turned it off it was opaque. But now you have a choice. Actually, this should be called opacity rather than transparency, because the higher the number, the more opaque it is. The lowest number, 0.25, is quite transparent, and you can make it increasingly opaque. and I'm going to leave it at 1, which is the highest setting, and that's completely opaque as far as the control center is concerned, although not necessarily for the Deepin terminal, as you can see. I just find it easier to demonstrate if I don't have a lot of visual clutter in the way. Now I'm going to go back down to Update Settings, and this is usually the first thing I do. I switch to the mirror, and you can detect system sources by going to System Source Detection. But if you notice, I've chosen US Linux kernel archives over the official mirror because it was faster, and that was true last time I tried it too. And as last time, you can test the speed by clicking on Test Speed. And as you can see, for me, 2 US mirrors, Linux kernel archives and Silicon Valley Web Hosting LLC are the fastest. If I scroll down, there are a lot more mirrors. Some of them haven't even registered yet, so you probably don't need to worry about those, at least where I am. However, they may be better for you, so don't forget to look down there. So now let me start at the beginning. Accounts up here gives my account name. Display is also showing, and this is the display scaling. It's at 1.0. You can go up to 2.0. This would be applicable if you have a high-resolution display. I could change the resolution, but of course I don't want to. Wireless screen projection, I don't have that enabled. Brightness. Night shift is off. EDP-1, adjust the brightness directly. To display again. I don't want to rotate it. If you do that, what you're likely to find is that your pointer movements are really confusing. I'm not going to change default applications. I've already been through transparency. Now in themes, you have the same two you had earlier, Deepin Default and Deepin Dark. Doesn't immediately change anything. So I'm going to keep it on Deepin Default. Under icon themes, there's quite a selection. Deepin Default. Keep your eye on the panel at the bottom. Deepin Dark. Those don't change too much. Maria. Papyrus. C. I'm going to leave it on Deepin Default. Under cursor theme, you have Adwaita, Deepin Default, which is checked, DMZ Black, and DMZ White. Then you have your choice of fonts. You can adjust the size rather easily. Change the standard and monospaced fonts. Now here's where you can enable the window effect. If I set the transparency back at 0.4 and I disable the window effect, takes a minute to adjust, but now you've lost transparency in everything, including the Deepin terminal here. So that's the way I'm going to leave that. Now I'm already scrolled down here under network. I have a wired connection enabled, but there's no Ethernet cable plugged in, so it's disconnected. And I have wireless enabled and it's connected. I don't have a hotspot, I don't use DSL, I don't use VPN, I don't use an application proxy, I don't use a system proxy. These are network details, I'm not going to go into that. Bluetooth, I'm going to disable that because it's going to spend a lot of time looking for devices which are not there. That's down here, Bluetooth. Sound, I've been playing with that already. I have my microphone established and everything. To do that, I had to go to Advanced. And my speakers are basically my headphones, which are plugged into the Yeti stereo microphone. And I also have the regular speakers enabled. And under Input, I have my Yeti stereo microphone enabled and also the internal microphone. That's under Advanced. Under Date and Time, I've already got the Chicago time zone, which was established on installation. I have auto sync enabled. That syncs to the internet at periods when I connect to the internet. And under time settings, this doesn't seem to have any setting for choosing between local time and universal time. Obviously, the clock shows universal time and the digital readout shows my local time. I could add another time zone if I wanted to. Under power management, I have power saving mode turned off. Auto mode switch is turned on. And monitor will suspend after 15 minutes. So I'm going to make that never. Computer will suspend after 30 minutes. I'm going to make that never. I have password required to wake up the monitor disabled, but password required to wake up the computer is enabled, so I'm going to disable that. Suspend on lid close. I'm going to disable that. Now under touchpad, I mentioned before that it had edge scrolling enabled, but there doesn't seem to be any way of changing that here. I happen to like that, so I'm going to leave it. Under keyboard and language, this is the repeat rate, the repeat delay, etc. I have enable numeric keyboard turned off. I'm going to turn that on. And you notice a number 1 appeared. And I turned on the caps lock prompt. So when I press the caps lock key, an uppercase letter A appears briefly. When I press it again, a lowercase letter A appears briefly. That's useful for me because I have an inexpensive keyboard which does not have an indicator light for the caps lock and number lock. I'm not going to change my keyboard layout or the system language. I'm not going to change any shortcuts. Under Update, it says checking for updates, please wait. And it's detected several updates, and it wants to know if I want to update, download and install updates. I'm going to click on that. Gives me a nice indication of the progress. As you can see, the updates are going rather quickly, but that's because I have a nearby mirror enabled. Update successfully. Please restart to use the system and application properly after updated. I am going to end this segment, update, and start a new segment. I'm back with the second segment of this recording after the updates were installed. And before I started Simple Screen Recorder again, I took this screenshot, and it shows that with just the desktop and the terminal and the free utility running, and screenshot, of course, I was using only 424 megabytes. So this qualifies as a medium weight distribution in that respect. Now if I run that utility again, now with Simple Screen Recorder running, I'm using 593 megabytes. That's still reasonably low compared to, say, GNOME 3.30. So those are some of the major new improvements. It is a lighter weight. It's a smaller ISO image. Some of the other things haven't changed. Here's the launcher. I have the small launcher enabled. While I'm on it, let me just say that it still includes computer videos, music, pictures, documents, downloads, and manual on the right. And it includes applications on the left in a, I think, from recent to less recent order. Under settings here, it goes to the control panels. Now, if you click on all categories on the bottom here, there's a little right arrow. You get a category-based menu, but you have to keep going back and forth. In other words, the applications in each category don't show up on the right. They show up on a new window, and then you have to go back to get to the categories. But at least you can get the categories. Now if I click on these divergent arrows up in the upper right-hand corner, it goes to the large array. And if I want to make it small again, I click on these arrows on the upper right, so I can adjust that as I wish. Up here in the upper left, this is actually the way it comes by default. You have an uncategorized array of launchers for installed programs. If you click on the upper left here again, now you have a categorized array, and you can go from item to item here: internet, music, video, graphics, office, reading, and system, and others. Now if you want to add launchers to the panel, you can drag and drop them. For instance, I'll add Deepin Manual, and it's now added to the panel. If you want to get it off the panel, just right-click and click on Undock. So let's see if that also works with the small menu. I'm going to try dragging and dropping Deepin Terminal. Doesn't seem to work at all. LibreOffice doesn't seem to work at all. So basically that works only with the large menu array. So that's the menu. Not too much has changed there. Now here's something. This is the multitasking view, one of the features I like. And it shows what's visible on all of the desktops. I happen to have Simple Screen Recorder running on desktop number 4. And if I minimize it, it still shows up, which is one thing I like, because I like to see everything that's running on these desktops. However, I found that this doesn't work under certain circumstances. If I go back to personalization here, and I disable the window effect, making everything opaque, now if I try this multitasking view, I get this note. Kindly reminder, this application cannot run without the window effect. So I'm going to click on OK, and I'm going to have to enable the window effect again. However, I can still minimize transparency or maximize opacity. And for some reason, the panel has suddenly moved to the top, so strange things can happen. I'm going to say location. You notice bottom is checked, but top is where it was. When I clicked on location again, though, it went back to the bottom. There are things in life that I can't explain. And another thing which is relatively unchanged, which I also like about Deepin, is the set wallpaper. I right-click on the desktop, and there's a beautiful selection of wallpapers you can scroll through here. They are normally set independently for each workspace. If you want, you can change them on each workspace and make them all the same, but by default, they're different on each workspace. Now I want to take another look at theming. I'm going to open some applications. Now I'm going to go over to the Control Center. Click on Personalization. And click on Themes. Now I have the Deepin default theme. I'm going to turn to Deepin Dark. Now nothing has actually changed here at all. But if I go to the File Manager, for instance, and go to this little array, it gives me an option for using the dark theme. And there's the dark theme for the File Manager. But if I go to the text editor, it isn't dark. I can make it dark. Switch theme. And it gives me an option of several themes here. And it gives little examples of what they look like. I'll try this one, Atom Dark. It's slightly different from the other dark theme. So what if I go to the terminal, which is this black transparent thing? Switch theme. It gives me a choice. So they're all dark and they all have different colors. Here's a light one. There's quite a few themes for the terminal. There's one for the terminal. I'm going to click on Switch Theme again. And I think this is the first one, Deepin. Now I'm going to go to another window. And I'm going to open Libreoffice. I'll open the spreadsheet, Libreoffice Calc. Now it opens in its own light theme, even though I have a dark theme selected. Deep and dark. So changing themes in LibreOffice is a task in itself. Now if I go back to all these open applications, and I click on Theme in the Control Center and go back to the default theme, doesn't seem to have any effect on these individually themed items. So theming is interesting, to say the least, and somewhat complex. I like the idea of being able to use different themes for different applications because they frequently are very different in the way that they're used. But I could see that this could be a very time-consuming procedure. Now this is the Deepin Store. If you enable a fast mirror first, this will populate rather quickly. If you don't, it could take a long time. And I've used this to install Simple Screen Recorder. You actually have to go up here and click on this box. And here's Simple Screen Recorder. As you can see, it's already installed. It says downloaded here. So those are some of the new features and some of the old features that I liked. One new feature that was announced that I didn't try was full disk encryption. I normally don't use that anyway because I have complete control of my computer. It's at home. I don't have anybody looking over my shoulder who might want to steal information from my computer. I installed it on 2 new partitions of an external drive that already had 2 partitions used by another distribution. And perhaps for that reason, it didn't even give me the option of full disk encryption when I installed it. This is XRAM Tech. Thanks for watching.